Documentary's always been my first love. I've never worked out how to make money at documentary. So I've done feature films as well, again through my company Studio of the North. I've always had some other employment. So I've recently retired from the position of course leader for the MA at Sheffield Hallam University. Succeed in the industry, tenacity, I think is the key thing. Tenacity and being, well, depends how you can, different people might do it in different ways, but I think actually being a nice person, so that when somebody's putting a crew together, when they're thinking about something they think of, oh yeah, I know who I want to work with. I want to work with her, I want to work with him, you know. So that you're good at what you do, but you're also, it's really important, you know, making films is like putting together a little family, and if you've got, you know, two warring siblings in that little family, it's not going to work. So it's really important that you are somebody that can help make a shoot work on the personal side as well as the technical side. Hang out, you know, get used to going to places and meeting people and talking to them, and in whatever sphere. So, you know, you may be at the checkout at Tesco's and you get chatting to the person behind the, you know, who's doing the till, and they've got an interesting story to tell. To be you know, alive to all of those things, because at the end of the day, it's no different really than drama filmmaking, because you're telling a story, and you need to find participants who will help you, or contributors who will help you to tell that story. But finding the story in the first place is the key thing. So just being personable, hanging out with people. I don't care whether it's in a bar or it's in bowling alley or whether it's in the shops or whether it's at university. Just listening to what people around you have to say. That's where the stories come from. Well, I'm a producer, not a director, but I do have kind of strong feelings about, you know, how you select people and what you do. First of all, they've got to be part of an interesting and compelling story. So, you know, if you look at somebody's background and they come from Sudan and they've got all sorts of interesting experiences in terms of coming to where you've met them, then that's something that enriches the story. It may be that you're not actually talking about that aspect of their life, but it enriches the story and what you know about that person and how you can articulate that story. Money, resources. Well, actually, if I say money and resources, that's your two answers. Money is one of the biggest challenges, and then finding resources. You know, they're not necessarily the same thing. So, you know, if you buddy up with your local university, you can find students that might want to work on your film or whatever. You can get equipment out of the university. You can you know, start to drive things that way. You may I don't know, convince a hotel chain that the story that you're telling is a story that should be told, that they for some reason are connected to, and that will produce resources. So I think, you know, it's being alive to other things and not just thinking, oh crumbs, I haven't got any money so I can't make this. You can absolutely make it. We've all got iPhones. We can all make it work on that basis. And it's where you go from there. How you liberate resources around you to help make things work. Well, for most of the films that I've been involved in, they're durational. So they can take between 5 to 9 years to make. So, you know, one of the things is looking at the story. Is it a story that, because I like to make longitudinal documentaries, that's going to sustain for that amount of time? Is there going to be enough development in that subject? And usually they're about personal growth, if that's what they're doing. So, for example, with my director Debbie Howard, we did a film about stillbirth, and those families had to spend 3-4 years going through the process for us to have the story that we wanted to tell. You know, from the process of having a stillbirth in the family to coming to some extent, to not to terms, but to understand what that meant fully for their family, and that just had to live out. So how do you make that work? How do you make the funding for that work? In that particular instance, we found a family who had very tragically been affected by stillbirth. Both the mother and then subsequently the daughter that she did have had a stillbirth. So both mother and daughter had stillbirths, and that family supported a lot of the film financially. So it's finding those sorts of things. I did another documentary when I was actually running a film fund as my day job, and at the end of every year I'd look to see what money was left in the film fund and what we had to shift, and we would just put that into the documentary. So for that was a 9-year film. So for 9 years we would just shift at the end of the year. Not huge amounts of money, maybe 50,000, 60,000 pounds, but it was enough to keep the documentary, going over that period. Yeah. That's a real challenge for a documentarian, and also the question of kind of crossing the line and becoming a friend with your subjects, and actually inadvertently influencing the way in which your contributors react to being filmed, and that kind of is an issue. But with sensitive stuff, I think really around the time of COVID, the whole idea of having intimacy coordinators, well-being coordinators for shoots came about, and as part of that, I think that duty of care that you have to your contributors has been something that, from a producer's point of view, it can now be a budget line. So you can put in, well-being consultant or something like that as a budget line to look after the health and mental well-being of your contributors. So I think that's one way of doing it. The other is by talking to people all the time and understanding your contributors. So if you had a contributor who had some kind of event in their previous life that has caused them great grief, that may influence your story, but you may decide not to go to that place unless they offer it up. So it's about being sensitive to your contributors and participants.
I know you answered this question, but I just need to ask you again.
Mm-hmm.
So, how important is collaboration in documentary filmmaking, and who are some of key people you typically work with during project?
Right. So the key people really, DOP, sound, director. The smaller you can keep it, the better. I'm working on a documentary at the moment where they've requested that I was recording sound and producing, but the participants requested the last filming session that we had with them that it was only one person. So I went and did camera. Please, the DOP hasn't seen the work yet. I hope it's good enough. And recorded the sound, but what we got was an incredible interview. So I think one of the things that going into a situation like that, what I did was prioritize the sound, because I knew that we could shoot other stuff but if we didn't have the sound, we wouldn't have the story. So I think in a way, key people, small as possible, director, DOP, sound, and if the DOP is the director or the sound person is the director, even better. You need to have a producer somewhere in the background, but typically that could be one of those people. That's not such a huge issue. I think what you really need is good spirit on set, because it can be trying at times. Think about the 3 most recent documentaries. One was where I was running a film fund, so I used money out of that. Now you may be able to find somebody in a similar situation. Typically with some of the film funds, they have to clear out all their money, or as they come to the end of March before the year end. So always when I was trying to fund documentaries, I'd go out hunting for film funds round about January time, and have something that was a very simple proposition for them. So yeah, you get your materials ready and send that out. So that's one way. So the next way was crowdfunding, and that was I think the first and only experience that I've had of crowdfunding. Took an incredible amount of work, not from me as the producer, but actually from the director and the director's assistant. If you're doing that, just think about what you're giving as rewards. You've got to make sure that you're not actually inadvertently selling something, because you'd fall foul of HMRC and tax would be levied on that. But make sure that it's something that people want, but something that has no kind of intrinsic value. So a ticket to the opening night of the film, the right to come and visit the set if appropriate, the right to come and sit in on the edit. People love that inside thing, and you've got plenty of time when you're editing to accommodate people to come and have a look. But as soon as you're saying, for every £5 you get one DVD, you're selling that DVD, you're not. So that's, sort of advice on that one. And then the third model that I've used is the model that we've talked about in terms of buddying up with a university and using the university's resources and to some extent the students to work on the film. And then for me, I'm lucky I've made a lot of feature films. I've got some returning funds from those feature films, and that goes into funding the documentaries going forward. So, that's later in your career, you might want to take that kind of portfolio look at what you're doing. But you have to have the passion, and you are passing over effectively with returning funds money that belongs to your company into that film, and so you've got to believe in that film and what it's doing. Technologies, well, I'm not a DOP, so I do dabble a little bit in camera. I do quite a lot of sound, but really I'm a producer, so it's looking at some of those producer, virtual production offices, those sorts of things, which I have used in the past. I'm not sure I'd use them again. For me, still, an Excel spreadsheet is the best way to figure out how you're financing and scheduling your documentary. And then really going to things like Sheffield Doc Fest, going to the craft sessions and just seeing what people are talking about. One of the things for us now is AI. How do we use AI within what we're doing? Well, I know I used to spend hundreds and thousands of pounds on transcription. I won't spend that anymore. But I'm also committed that the people that used to transcribe the stuff are not going to be put out of work. So we'll find something else in the production chain for them to be able to do.
Actually, I was about to ask about AI, but...
Okay. Well, I mean, AI, I think you have to embrace it. I think to sit on your thumbs and say, I'm not going to have anything to do with it, is perhaps to deny the world in which we now live. I think what you've got to do is work out how to use AI to make things better, not worse. So we don't want AI generated generic stories, that sort of stuff, but using AI perhaps to help sharpen an image that wasn't quite clear, without getting into making false images. Using AI, as I say, to log rushes, that sort of stuff, I think is perfectly acceptable. While making a documentary, gosh, okay, yeah, we were making a film about stillbirth. One of the families, the father was in the special forces and had a lot of training in dealing with grief and death. And we went to film a special service in church that they were having for all the stillborn, for the parents or for the families of stillborn children. And we just happened to be filming this guy, and as they were giving the sermon, a tear just came out, and that you think, here's this big, tough, burly, trained guy, and the film that we're making, the issue it's about is so great that it can make him cry at a Christmas celebration. And, you know, afterwards we said to him, are you okay with us including this in the film? Because obviously his reputation as a, you know, and he said, absolutely, people need to know that people like me can be reduced to tears by what's happening. I was one of the founders of Sheffield International Documentary Festival. At the time, I think the documentary community really felt that documentary was under threat, and that there was a lot of television that was claiming factual as documentary. And we wanted to, you know, preserve that space for documentary, for telling stories in that more ingrained, more involved way, rather than factually, you know, holding a mirror up and reporting what was there. And so that was the original intent of the documentary festival 31 years ago. We had built some cinemas here in Sheffield, and so that was a perfect site to attract the documentary festival to come here. It wasn't our idea, it was an idea of somebody called Peter Symes, who was working for BBC Bristol, and in Bristol he couldn't get any support for the idea of a documentary festival. He heard about what we were doing up here with building the cinemas, and he came to see us, and we said absolutely. And that relationship was actually enabled by a producer in Sheffield called Alex Husbourne. And so he brought Peter Symes up to Sheffield, and Alex said, look, I'm not the person to have anything to do with running your festival, but I know somebody who is. And so we met, and it was you know, absolutely the right idea at the right time in the right place. So, you know, that's what we did. So, you know, the documentary festival in a way was born out of a wish to preserve documentary making as a form, in its own right. One tip, I think, to keep yourself going, because documentary is a long and lonely process, and I'm not sponsored by them, but if you Google futureme.com, you can send an email to yourself in the future. So I regularly now receive these emails. You can set them for 18 months or 5 years. I usually do them like 5 years, something like that, or some time in between that. And just use that to inspire yourself, because the real problem is keeping going. So if you say, Colin, today you did that interview and it just didn't work. Have you managed to crack that? Have you managed to work out how to work with that person, with your participant, to release their story? And, you know, in 5 years' time you get it and think, do you know, I managed to do that. So this problem that I've got today, this challenge that I've got today, is I can overcome that, because 5 years ago that looked like the huge challenge, and I overcame that. So it's about, you know, using that to inspire yourself. And I think it's a great little mechanism. Maybe you keep old notebooks and you flick back through old notebooks, but I just like it when a future me email comes to me, bing, and it's there. It doesn't cost anything. I don't know why they do it, but it doesn't cost anything. And you just send yourself an email in the future to inspire yourself, and maybe, you know, kick yourself up the arse every now and then. Tell yourself to get going again and stop worrying about paying the mortgage or whatever it is that's bogging your life down, and to get on with the true good things in life. And I think documentary making is one of those true and good things in life. It certainly is for me.
Do you help?
Yes, lots of people, lots of the documentarians around me. You go to something like DocFest and you see people that have been working for years and years and years to make their film, and you realise we're all in the same boat. It's, you know, it's a tough world out there for all of us, but, you know, we've got various tools now. In the UK we've got the tax credit, which is always worth looking at in terms of, you know, those resources that we were talking about earlier. But inspirational individuals all around, and sometimes in unexpected places. I won't say what session it is, but I went to a session at DocFest, and I absolutely expected to be going there to be critical and to have my criticism informed of the way in which that particular distribution channel had got involved with that material. I came away completely enlightened. They had dealt with that material brilliantly, and I found it a complete inspiration to think that that part of that distribution channel, which is quite a commercial distribution channel, could deal with sensitive material in that way. I was absolutely delighted. And I think that comes back to a point that we were making earlier about post-COVID. I think people are a lot more aware of being sensitive with their contributors rather than being sensational. And I think that was one of the things that when we set up the DocFest originally, that sensationalism was also kind of creeping into documentary. So, people were looking for the most extreme form of whatever, the most terrible, horrible thing of whatever, rather than looking for where the good stories were. It was the extremes that were telling the stories rather than the stories themselves. So yeah, I find inspiration in a lot of peculiar places, and then sometimes I find documentary inspiration in film, in feature films. Films where maybe the participant has a certain sort of characteristic, and you think, yes, I know that characteristic. I saw the film recently where the main character was very interested in small details of everyday life. Now, as I've been talking to you here, I've seen that there's an orange bit of tape on that light stand there, and I know what that orange bit of tape was put there for, and that kind of gives me a little story, and I think, oh, that light stand, that has its own history, and I might want to make a documentary about that light stand. I don't particularly at the moment, but those are the types of things that give you inspiration, looking at those tiny details and working out how does that tell a bigger story. And I find inspiration in that, and often within feature film you find that. When you can find that within documentary, then you've got a great documentary, going from the absolute tiny little particle of dust that you find that's of interest and finding that there's this big story outside that. Make documentaries with passion. I think that's the thing, with passion. Believe in your subjects, believe in your participants and what you're doing. That's it.